Everybody, it's Peter Schiff here. It's Tuesday, October 20th, 2009. As you can see, I'm finally back home. Anyway, an interesting day in the market this morning. Early this morning, the dollar was at new lows. The dollar index was at a new low for the move, just barely above the 75 level. You had new 52-week highs in the Swiss franc and the Australian dollar. Then we had a bit of a reversal Tuesday. The dollar strengthened. That brought down commodity prices, brought down gold prices about $8. Oil was down. U.S. stock market was down. I think the catalyst for the turnaround was some economic data that came out before the U.S. market opened that showed that housing starts were not quite as strong as people were thinking, and the producer price numbers came out lower. And I guess that made people thinking that maybe the economy isn't picking up to the degree that they thought, and so that led to a move in the market. But, you know, normally you would think that a robust, growing U.S. economy is what would be good for the dollar. And the fact that the economy is not doing as well as people thought, that should be bad for the dollar. But it's all topsy-turvy right now. When people think the economy is picking up, that's bad for the dollar. And when they think it's slowing down, that's been good for the dollar. And I think the reason for that is because what's really happening, it's not that the economy is improving. It's that when we get positive data, it's simply a reflection of more air being blown back into the bubble. And it shows that the government is being successful in trying to reflate our bubble economy, which of course is bad for the dollar because we simply flood the world with more of our currency. Maybe when we get some economic data that's not as good as what people are hoping, it shows that some of that air is leaking back out. And perversely, that actually ends up being good for the dollar. I think at some point people will realize that that news is actually even worse for the dollar, because if air is leaking back out, of course the government will try everything in its power to blow air back into the bubble and thus weaken the dollar even further. You know, along those lines, yesterday Brazil announced a 2% transaction tax on foreign investors. They're trying to discourage foreign investment in their market. Now you might think, why would they do something like that? Well, the Brazilian real is up about 35% against the U.S. dollar this year, despite the fact that the Brazilian monetary authorities have been gobbling up dollars like there's no tomorrow. They now have more than 200 billion of them in reserve. This is all in an effort to try to keep their currency from rising too rapidly against the dollar, and so now they're using the tax to try to deter investment. The Brazilian market actually dropped 4% today, and I think that tax actually helped get a little bit of a rally in the dollar today. But, you know, I don't know how many people have read the book Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds by McKay. I actually link it on my recommended reading list on the Europac website. But, you know, a lot of times when you read books like that, you know, you wonder to yourself when you're reading about the Dutch tulip craze, or when you read about, you know, the Salem witch trials, you know, you wonder how it is that people could be so stupid. Well, you know, you don't really have to wonder. We're living through it right now. We know how people can be so stupid because they're being that stupid all around us. And I'm sure when people write the history books about this time period, people are going to read in awe about this mass delusion where the whole world somehow thinks that they have to prop up the U.S. dollar, that somehow every economy feels that they owe their success to their ability to sell products to a group of people who can't afford to pay for them. And therefore, they have to keep vendor financing on a global scale, and that when their currencies go up in value, that somehow this is seen as some kind of problem that needs to be cured, rather than a blessing that should simply be enjoyed. So I think what the Brazilians are doing is wrong. It's the same thing that people around the world are doing. They're trying to prop up the dollar by debasing their own money, by trying to find ways to deter investments that they should be welcoming and encouraging. You know, speaking about the stupid things that we do as a society, I happened to notice today that there was some figures that came out on education costs. And the cost of a university tuition in the last year is now up 6%. Now, maybe that's a little bit less than the annual average, but it's still interesting that during the biggest recession since the Great Depression, when prices are collapsing for many things, that college tuition still managed to increase by 6%. Now, the reason that happened was because of the government. You see, not too long ago, the student loan market was basically in the process of shutting down. There were no buyers because a lot of students were defaulting on their loans. There was no credit. And the government came to the rescue. The Federal Reserve came in. Part of the stimulus required the Federal Reserve to buy up student loans and basically breathe life back into a dying market. Had it not been for the government, really, that whole secondary market for student loans would have shut down. And what that would have done is that would have caused or forced universities to slash their tuitions. They would have had to do that, otherwise they would have had no students. They would have had no customers. But the government came to the rescue of the colleges. And because of what the government did, the colleges didn't have to slash their tuitions. Instead, they were able to raise their tuitions by an average of another 6%. All of this to the detriment of young Americans who are now being forced to pay higher college tuitions because of massive subsidies to our university system. All of this should come to an end. We should not be saddling our children with huge college tuitions, basically mortgages without houses that they have to repay. We should force universities to compete for students just like other businesses compete for customers without government subsidies. Let tuition costs come down so that our kids would not have to borrow so much money to go to college, or might not have to borrow any money at all to go to college. Anyway, that's it for today. Don't forget, listen tomorrow to Wall Street Unspun on my weekly radio show. Anyway, that's it. I'll be back again soon.